let's take a look at some announcements just to begin. Thursday of this week, we're not going to be meeting in this classroom at 11 o'clock. Instead, you should go to the basement of the Student Center. BE5 is just it's the big room in the basement that holds several hundred people. You'll know it when you see it. There'll be a lot of people there. The conference actually starts at 9 o'clock, but one of the speakers that used to be the dean of the College of Engineering, she's an attorney and an engineer, she's coming back and her talk starts at 11:05, so it'll work out perfectly. So BE5 at 11 a.m. and your attendance of that is going to be assessed because I would like you to write a paragraph summarizing the message that you heard. And the way that you do that is go here into our course website, click on Engineering 111, and it'll be on the front page of things that pops up. It'll say 126, which means the attendance for 126. And so when you click on that, you don't have to type it while you're listening. You can take notes and write it up later. You can either upload a file or you can just click Write Submission and type it right into there. So it doesn't have to be lengthy. I don't need a transcript. Just explain what she spoke about, your impressions, and what's the main message that a freshman engineering student should take away from that. Do you have a question? Well, it's not great, but you made it here on time, right? Yeah. Well, it's at 11:05, so that gives you a couple of minutes of leeway. I've made it to the Student Center in less than 5 minutes before when I was running late. Yeah. In the summer, and I was streaming with sweat. Yeah. The name of the speaker? Her name's Betsy Doolin. There's a lot of speakers during that conference. She's not the only one, but I just looked at the schedule of who's speaking that day, and she happens to be the speaker who's talking during our class time. You're welcome to go to more of the conference. They don't require you to register as a student. The professionals who are going, there will be a lot of engineering professionals there. They're paying, I think, close to $200 to attend the event. Because when you are an engineer, you have to get continuing education to renew your license. And so conferences like this count towards the continuing education requirement. All right. So any questions about what we're doing on Thursday? I'll be there. You'll see me there. Just as a reminder, your second homework assignment is due a week from Thursday, and it includes some of the calculator operations that we're going to be talking about in class today. And I also have an in-class exercise that we're going to do. This is how I'm going to determine the attendance today, and I mentioned that you'd have to have your calculator today to count for the attendance. So hold up your calculators. I just want to see how many beautiful shining Casios there are in the room. I see maybe one that's not there. So many beautiful Casios. All right. There's something on here where I ask you to say, did you have your calculator in class today? Circle yes or no, and then some calculation problems. Any questions before we start talking about the calc function solve and equation solving through modes? All right. As a reminder, these recorded lectures are available on YouTube, and you can get to the link through our course webpage if you ever need to review what buttons got pushed as you're working on the assignment. All right, so if you examine your calculator, up here on the left side near the top is the calc button, and if you push the shift, that turns it into solve, and if you push alpha, that's equal. So we're going to be using both the calc and the solve function today in class, and it's useful for solving expressions like equations that you may have come up. The limitation of this Casio calculator is it doesn't have all the letters of the alphabet on it. Hi guys. It doesn't have all the letters of the alphabet, so you won't be able to use maybe the variables that exist in the formula that you see in front of you. You'll notice the way that you get to letters is with the alpha key, the red button. And so if you look, there's A, B, C, D, E, F, x, y, m, but not all the variables that you might need. So sometimes you have to translate an equation that's on paper into substitute variables that you can put into the calculator. So let's say 3a plus b. You can follow along if you like. I'm going to do this on the emulator. If we wanted to enter that equation, you would do 3 and then alpha to put the a in. Alpha, and the minus sign is the one that has the a above it. So 3a plus b. So alpha and then the b. And if we type in enter, then it knows it has some equation, equals. Right now, nothing is defined. But if we put in the CALC button, it'll start asking questions like what is a and what is b. And so we can define those variables. Let's see. If we want a to be equal to 5 and b to equal to 10, then you just type 5 equals, now it's asking what is b, 10 equals, and then it solves it. 3a plus b is 25. And so does that work out? It was 3 times 5, which is 15, plus 1b, which is 10. Together it's 25. So it makes sense. Now, what makes this worth doing, I mean, that's simple math we could have probably done in our head, right? What makes it worth doing is the fact that you can redo the equation over again, and it already knows 3a plus b is what you want to do. So if you push the calc button a second time, it asks, what do you want a to be this time around? And it remembers 5 was the variable from previously, but you could update it with a new number. So you could type in 7, for instance, equals, overwrite, instead of having 10 for the variable of b, you could have it be 20, equals, and then it solves the function again as many times as you'd like to do it. And it doesn't have to be only 2 terms, 3a plus b. It could be many terms, as many as you've got variables, and then it'll ask you to assign a number to each of the variables, and it'll solve. Okay, so try this one. If you've got a scratch piece of paper, this is an equation that we're going to have to translate into variables that we can put into the calculator. Because if you look on the calculator, there is no cost button, there is no distance button, there's no weight or volume. And so using the format that we had in the previous example that was on screen, we had A, B, and C, and then we were putting a number in front of it. So for this one, try and write down an equation that you would just on paper that later on you can enter into the calculator. I'll give you a moment to write that down. Okay, so if you've done that, you might have had the equation looking something like 0.33a plus 15b plus 52.56c. This formula, it looks like maybe it's the price of sending a shipment somewhere. So now that you have that written on the paper, try typing it into your calculator. So you start off just by the number. Okay, so 0.33 alpha A plus 15 alpha B plus 52.56 alpha c. So that's what you'll have on the calculator. And if you push the calc button, then it's going to start asking you what numbers should you use for A, B, and C. So solve it for these two cases. If you've got one package that's going to travel 93 miles, is 42 pounds, and has a volume of 2.43 cubic feet, find the price that it's going to cost to ship that item, and do the same thing for the other case. It's going a little bit further. So that first shipment should cost $788.41 to send. And the nice thing is you don't have to type it over again to do this next set of calculations. Just push the calc button again. So push calc and it's asking, okay, well, what's A this time? This time A, which is the travel distance, is 1854. Enter. The weight, 27.5. Enter. And it'll tell you the previous variable. If you just push enter, then you're accepting that previous variable to count for this time. But if you type in something new, it'll ignore what it had in its memory from the previous time around, and it'll use the new value, 4.14. All right, so this other package, $1,241.92. Okay. Any questions about how to use the calc button? Seems pretty convenient. All right. Closely related to calc is the solve function. And it's actually the same button, but you just have to push the shift key before using solve. And whereas in calc, what we were doing is only typing in one side of an equation. You know, we didn't have, when we wrote this on the board, we didn't have y equals. We were just typing in one side of the equation and asking it to solve for those terms combined. In the solve function, you are typing in an entire equation, meaning both sides of it. And the way that it's set up in this expression, if we have y equals a times x squared plus b, you can make any one of these be the unknown. And you can solve for what you leave blank. For our purposes, though, let's try typing that in. So it's a little bit tricky, and I'm going to show you how to go back. This delete button, if you ever type the wrong thing, the delete button as you're entering an equation will take you back a step. So for instance, if I had alpha and I meant to do y, but I accidentally did m, and for some reason that bothered me, I just go delete and it erases the last keystroke. So alpha y equals. Now I want to point out that there's two equals buttons. There's this alpha calc, which is equals, and then there's the equals down here. The calculator's a little bit picky. Sometimes it'll let you use the keystroke equals, and sometimes you need to use the alpha equals, because this keystroke down here at the bottom right, that's telling the calculator that it needs to execute whatever instructions you've given it. Whereas if you're entering a formula, sometimes you have to use this equals as a character in the formula. I still haven't figured out exactly what the dividing line is for when it freaks out and when it doesn't. For our cases, let's do the alpha equals, because we haven't finished writing the equation yet. So y equals a, so alpha a. You don't have to type in times to put in the x. You can just do now alpha x. And for squared, here's the squared button, plus b, alpha b. All right. And once we've got that in, we do shift calc, which is the solve function. So shift calc. So it's asking what should it use for y. And on the next slide here, I suggest let's use y equals 0, a equals 1, and b equals -2. Okay, so it's asking for y. I'm going to let y equals 0. A is 1. We still see those leftover values from last time. We used the calculator and we're assigning the variables. So a equals 1 and b equals -2. Just like there's two different ways to write equals, you'll note that there's also two different minus signs on here. There's minus the operation, and then there's also minus the character. And a lot of times you can get away with using the operation, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to type in the character -2 for b. All right. And then solve for x. Now this is a little bit of a, not a misnomer, but it looks like it's solved for x, but it hasn't solved for it yet. The way that this calculator works is it iterates in order to solve for the value of x. And it's asking for a guess right now. It needs an initial starting point so that it can substitute the value of x into the right-hand side and see if its left-hand side guess matches that. And it's going to repeat that over and over and over many times until the solution converges. And so what it's asking for right now is a guess value. And as long as your guess is reasonably close, then it'll eventually converge. So if we just say, for instance, let's have our guess value be 1. So I type in 1 equals, then it solves for the actual value of x. It finds that x is actually 1.414. And this L minus R is just saying the difference between the left-hand side and the right-hand side when you substitute in this value of x is 0. So the solution has successfully converged. And you can do the same thing. You can repeat the calculation again by doing shift calc, which is the solve. And it's asking for an updated value of y. So we could say, well, this time maybe we want y to be 5. We'll use the same other values. But what I'm interested now is how bad could our initial guess be and the calculator still manages to successfully find the answer? I don't know the answer to that. Let's try. What if we said x was 592? Still, it manages to find the solution pretty quickly. All right, I'm going to give it a really bad guess. All right, let's see if it can find it this time. There was a little bit more of a pause there, but eventually it found it. Yes? Well, sometimes you know an expected value. For example, the point is to get the solution to solve faster. Because if it really has no idea, it has to guess at random. And machines aren't very good at guessing at random, you know? And so if we can give it any kind of like a range to begin in, then it'll converge faster. So I think it's just so that we can get an answer out of a calculator that costs $14. Yeah? You sure? Okay. Other questions? All right, so that's the solve function. And again, the solution is, you only be confident in the solution you get when you see that the left side minus the right side is equal to 0, because that means that it successfully found convergence. All right, let's try a little bit more complicated formula. This, instead of just using the square button, we're going to have to enter exponents. And along with entering exponents, you have to tell the calculator when to step down from the exponent back into the normal part of the equation. So you have to use this arrow key. So let's try entering this into the calculator. I'm going to just push the AC button to clear things and start typing it in. So alpha to get the y. equals A, so alpha A, alpha x, and then you use the exponent button, and you can see now we're up here above. I'll type in the 4, and then you have to push the arrow key, because if you just did plus at this point, it would put the plus in the exponent. And we don't want it in the exponent, we want it down below in the main equation. So pushing the arrow button gets you out of the exponent and back where you need to be. So plus b times x to the 3rd power, using that arrow button again, plus c times x squared. Squared, we don't have to use the exponent button, so we can save a keystroke if we just use the squared, because it automatically jumps back down into the main equation. So you don't have to use the arrow button after the squared. Plus d times x plus e. All right. Takes a while because of all of the alpha buttons we have to push each time we want one of the letters. Okay, so to get it to solve this equation, we're going to do shift and push the calc button, which means solve, once we've done shift. By the way, when I know that I've got the shift button pressed previously because the S comes up here on the screen. So if you get interrupted after pushing the shift button, you can't remember whether you did it or not, there's the S. Yes, you did. So calc, now it wants the guess. So y equals 10, just equals, since that's the right value already. A is 1, B is -2, C is, I'm going to use 4, D is 5, E is 1. Okay, and it's asking for a guess. Let's use 1 as the initial guess, and then it solves for the answer, 1.088. Anybody else get that same thing? Yep. All right, good. Any questions so far? I know that the math is simple, but sometimes the placement of the buttons or the syntax is the tripping point. 1.088. And again, we know we have confidence that that's the right answer because it tells us the left minus the right was 0. We can go back and edit the equation, which is kind of nice. You know, even after we cleared it and it's not on the screen anymore, if you push the back arrow, then it'll let you go back. And so maybe if we wanted to have this be ax to the 5th power, I'd put the cursor to where the 4 is, just after the 4, and I'm going to push the delete button. And I hope, anyway, what that'll do is it'll go back and delete the 4, and it'll allow me to replace that with the 5. And so you can scroll around and edit. So we've got the formula there. I'm going to try and solve it again. I've changed that to the 5th power, so if I have to calculate it again, I'll use all the same values that I had before. An initial guess, that's based on when the exponent was to the 4th power, but now it finds it's 1.0788. Left minus right, and we can see here that it summarizes the equation. And if you want to see it again, you just hit the back arrow. All right. The equation solver is a way of saving some time. You have to type in fewer keystrokes if you use equations that are of a standard format. That's how the equation solver works. And it's a different mode on your calculator. So far we've been in mode 1, but if we switch to mode 5 for equation writing, then it offers a couple of suggestions of different typical forms of equations. For example, a 2 by 2 system, which we'll see expressed as a matrix, 3 by 3. You can do quadratic or cubic equations. And so the advantage of this is simply that you don't have to write in all of the variables. You don't have to do the keystroke of x, y, and the right-hand side of the equation. So let's take as an example a system of equations that has 2 equations and 2 unknowns. This formula here, x plus 2y equals 3, 2x plus 3y equals 4. So we've got these 2 equations. We want to find out what is x and what is y. Well, the nice thing about entering this in is that we just have to put the numbers in front of the variables. And so you can see that the way that they've written it on this matrix that we're going to input is 1, which corresponds to the 1 in front of the x, 2, which is the 2 in front of the y, and then on the right-hand side of the equation is the 3, and so on for the second equation. All right, so what we have to do is go into mode 5. So click the mode button, which is next to on, and mode 5 is equation. And then we have to choose which one we're going to do. And we're going to do 2, because that's how we can get to, hold on a second, no, we're going to do 1. Yeah, option 1. It's right there on screen, option 1. All right, so first is the 1, which corresponds to the x, and you press enter, and then it takes you to the next field. 2, enter, 3, enter. Then it jumps down to the second equation, 2, 3, and 4. All right. And if you press enter, then it will solve for x. And then enter again, it'll solve for y. And if you press enter a third time, it gives you the option to go up and edit the equations. So you could change the prefixes in front of the variables if needed. And if you want to get out of this equation writing mode and back just into normal calculations, then you'd have to do mode 1 to get back out of the equation writing mode, which is mode 5. All right, so try this. Solve this one on your calculator. Set it up by going into mode 5, and this is going to be another one of option 1. So you should key it in like this as you're on the screen. And then the result, it will give you, in terms of the fraction, which you can push the S to D button and it'll express that as a number. Enter will get you from the X to the Y. And again, the S to D button will express, it will show the number rather than the fraction. All right. It can also do 3 equations and 3 unknowns using option 2. So let's try typing in a more complicated system. So you have to go mode 5 into equation and option 2 for a 3 by 3 matrix. And then type in each of the numbers in front of the variables there. And be sure that you include the negative sign. I just tried, you can use the negative key or the alpha, either one of the negative keys will give you what you need when you're in the fields for these number prefixes. do that one on here just so it's included in the video. Mode 5, option 2. All right, so once we've got the matrix entered, we can press enter, and it'll tell us the answer here for x, for y, and for z. And with any luck, those are the right numbers. Yep, looks like it. X, y, and z. All right. And again, to get out of this equation writing mode, you have to just do mode 1, and it'll take you back. All right, I know you're anxious to try this out, so that's what we're going to do with the remainder of our class time today. I have an in-class exercise for you to solve, and it's fine for you to work on this with your classmates. It's just to kind of reinforce the ideas that were in today's lecture. Problem 1, though, is related to linear interpolation. And that's from a couple of lectures ago that we discussed linear interpolation. It wasn't included in your homework assignment, but I want to give you some extra practice on that because it's important. So problem 1 is linear interpolation, and then the other problems, 2 at the bottom and on the back side of the paper, are related to calc, solve, and mode from today. Please be sure to write your name, and I'm going to collect this on your way out. Once you've finished it, you're welcome to stick around and work on the homework assignment, or if you'd like, you can leave. But be sure to put your name and set it here on the chair, because that's how I'm going to take attendance today. Yeah, you can write on the paper for this one.